age story of a woman of age.
Right.
And the way she comes out of her shell after her entire life of 60 some odd years. Never mind how old you are.
Hollywood has always looked like a magical place from the outside. The bright lights, the big awards, the stars waving from red carpets. It all paints a picture of glamour and success. But the reality behind those smiling faces is often very different. For Sally Field, one of the most respected actresses in the history of American cinema, the road through Hollywood was not always a smooth one. Behind her warm personality and her 2 Academy Awards are stories she kept mostly to herself for many years. Stories about co-stars who made her feel small, dismissed, and sometimes even invisible. Now, at the age of 78, Sally has begun to open up about some of those experiences. And what she has shared gives us a very different picture of what it was actually like to work in that world. Before we go any further, if you enjoy stories about the real lives of Hollywood legends and the untold moments that happen behind the scenes, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell. We cover these kinds of stories regularly, and you would not want to miss what is coming next. Now, let us get into it. The first name that comes up when Sally talks about difficult working relationships is Tommy Lee Jones. By any measure, Jones is a talented and respected actor, but talent and warmth are 2 very different things, and from the moment Sally stepped onto a set with him, she felt the difference immediately. There was no greeting, no small talk, no acknowledgement that she had even walked into the room, just silence. For most people, a quiet colleague might not be a big deal, but acting is not like most jobs. When you're trying to create genuine emotion on screen, you need to feel some kind of connection with the person standing across from you. Sally depended on that connection. It was part of how she worked, and Jones seemed completely uninterested in providing it. Between takes, she tried everything she could think of. She made small jokes, she asked questions about their characters, she tried to find any kind of common ground. But Jones would simply show up, say his lines, hit his marks, and leave. No conversation, no engagement, no effort to build anything with her at all. For Sally, it felt like performing in an empty room. Critics later commented that the film Backroads lacked chemistry between its 2 leads, and audiences picked up on something being off. But what those audiences could not have known was that the coldness they were sensing was not scripted, it was real. Sally has described the experience as one of quiet erasure, like working beside someone who had already decided she was not worth acknowledging. She never worked with Tommy Lee Jones again after that film, and given everything she has said about it, that choice seems entirely understandable. The story with Burt Reynolds is more complicated because it came wrapped inside something that looked, at least from the outside, like a love story. Their on-screen chemistry in Smokey and the Bandit was undeniable. Audiences adored them together, and in real life, the 2 were in a relationship, which made their partnership feel even more electric. But Sally has been honest in recent years about how that relationship actually felt from where she was standing. Despite Reynolds having a magnetic charm that filled every room he entered, Sally often felt unseen beside him. Conversations would drift away from her, her ideas would get brushed aside, compliments, when they came, felt hollow. The same charm that made Reynolds so irresistible to the public could turn cold in private, and the line between playful teasing and something more hurtful was not always clear. Over time, the emotional weight of that dynamic began to affect their work together as well. What had once felt effortless started to feel strained. Sally found herself feeling less like a creative equal and more like someone who was simply there to stand beside the star. She handled it professionally, as she always did, but the toll it took on her was real. Years later, she summed the whole experience up with a kind of quiet sadness. She had loved him, she said, but the relationship hurt too much. For all the joy their films brought to audiences, what Sally carried away from that chapter of her life was something far more complicated than happiness. Robert Blake brought an entirely different kind of difficulty into Sally's world. Where Jones was cold and Reynolds was complicated, Blake was chaotic. From the very first day they shared a set during the filming of Say Goodbye, Maggie Cole, the atmosphere shifted. Blake didn't simply bend the rules of a professional film set, he seemed to take pleasure in destroying them entirely. One moment he would follow the script exactly as written, the next he would throw it out completely and start improvising new lines that nobody had seen before, leaving directors, camera operators, and fellow cast members scrambling to keep up. The creative environment that Sally needed to do her best work was simply impossible to maintain around him. And it wasn't only the unpredictability that made things so hard. Blake was prone to angry outbursts, sudden walkouts, and dramatic mood swings that made every single day on set feel uncertain. Sally later described the experience using a word that speaks volumes about how seriously it affected her. She called it traumatic. Not frustrating, not exhausting, traumatic. The film never even made it to release, collapsing completely under the weight of the disorder that had overtaken the production. For Sally, that was not just a professional disappointment, it was a real wound. She kept her distance from Blake after that film and never worked with him again. Some people might argue that his behavior was simply an extreme version of artistic passion, but for Sally Field, what she lived through during that production left a mark that time never fully erased.
Shirley MacLaine presented a very different kind of challenge, one that played out more quietly but cut just as deeply. On paper, the pairing of Sally Field and Shirley MacLaine in Steel Magnolias sounded like the kind of casting decision that dreams are made of. Two celebrated actresses, two very different styles, sharing the screen in a beloved story. And on screen, that combination worked beautifully. Audiences were moved. The film became a classic. But off-camera, something far less harmonious was happening between them. Sally approached her role with care and discipline, working hard to build something emotionally truthful and understated. MacLaine arrived with a very different energy. She was loud, confident, and had a habit of reminding those around her that she had already earned her place at the top of Hollywood. What should have been a creative partnership gradually became something more like a quiet competition, with MacLaine consistently pushing herself toward the center of every room and every scene. The tension came to a head during one of the most emotionally demanding scenes in the entire film. What was meant to be a moment of devastating silence required 17 separate takes to complete. Not because Sally was struggling, but because MacLaine kept breaking the mood with sharp remarks and sarcastic comments that made it nearly impossible to hold the emotional weight of the scene together. When audiences watch that moment in the finished film, many cry. What they do not know is what it cost Sally Field to get there. There has never been a public reconciliation between the two women, no nostalgic reunion interview, no friendly look back at the experience they shared. Just the memory of two Hollywood legends on a set where the collaboration came at a price. James Woods brought yet another version of difficulty. This one was less about ego or chaos and more about a kind of relentless intellectual pressure that Sally found exhausting to work around. During the filming of Kiss Me Goodbye, Woods was sharp, calculated, and always in motion mentally. He challenged directors openly in front of the crew. He rewrote lines without asking permission. He analyzed Sally's performance choices out loud, turning what should have been a comfortable creative space into something that felt more like a courtroom. Sally has said that working with Woods never made her feel supported. It made her feel like she was constantly being evaluated. His talent was never in question, but talent without warmth or respect for a colleague can make a set feel deeply uncomfortable. And for Sally, that discomfort never went away during the entire production. The final name on this list is perhaps the most striking because the person in question never even made a film with Sally Field. All it took was a single audition. In the early 1980s, Sally came in to read for a project that Dustin Hoffman was attached to. What should have been a straightforward professional meeting turned into one of the most humiliating experiences of her career. Hoffman was already working the room when she arrived, joking with producers and setting the tone long before the reading began. When it finally did, he interrupted her mid-line, corrected her delivery, and questioned her choices openly in front of everyone there. Sally later reflected on it with painful clarity. She was not being tested for chemistry, she said. She was being taken apart piece by piece by a man who had already made his decision before she even opened her mouth. What made it worse was what came afterward. Word reached Sally that Hoffman had reportedly boasted about the audition, claiming there had been no chemistry and suggesting that he had made sure of it. For weeks after that meeting, Sally questioned herself, wondering if she had somehow failed. But with time came a different understanding. The problem, she eventually realized, had never been her performance. The problem was a man who needed to control the room so completely that he was willing to do it at another person's expense. She never forgave him for it. And even now, decades later, after every award she has won and every extraordinary performance she has given, that audition still stands as one of the sharpest memories of her career. Sally Field has spent more than 5 decades in Hollywood. She has survived difficult men, difficult dynamics, and an industry that has not always treated women with the respect they deserve. The stories she has shared in recent years are not complaints. They're honest accounts of what it actually took to build the career she built, and of the human cost that came along with it. For every shining moment on that red carpet, there was something harder happening just out of frame. And understanding that is what makes her story and her achievements all the more remarkable. If this kind of storytelling is something you enjoy, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. What do you make of the experiences Sally Field has described? Do these stories change how you see these actors, or does Hollywood simply demand a toughness that comes at a price? We would love to hear from you.